So today I have another interview, and now we're going to kind of jump into part 5 of the kind of constraints around the ocean industry and how we might overcome some of those constraints or take them into the project. Um, so if you've been following along, we went through all of the other parts and we talked to quite a few different people, and there's a big database that's now on my website of the different shapes and segments of the industry as well as stakeholders in the industry. And today I have Gina here to talk to me, and I'll let her introduce herself a little bit, and then we'll kind of get into and dig into the different constraints and different parts of the industry as we work on redesigning it.
Well, firstly, I need to say I'm very excited to be here today and well done on this fantastic initiative, Jacqueline. It's a pleasure to be part of it. Brief line on me, I'm Gina Panayiotou. I'm a maritime lawyer and ESG strategist. I'm based in London, currently the ESG manager at West of England, who are maritime insurers, and have also previously founded Oceans Arena, which is an ESG consultancy supporting startups and NGOs owners with their ESG strategies and brand positioning. So that's just a bit about me.
What motivated you to become involved in the ocean industry, and how did you really become an advocate for ESG and ocean sustainability?
So I think the answer to both is probably my love for the oceans. What made me enter the industry was a bit by chance. You probably hear this a lot. I was looking for a master's degree to do after I finished my law degree. Somebody recommended maritime. They said, Cyprus is an up and coming sector, look into it. I did. I found it super fascinating from the international element to anything involving the ocean. So I thought this is fantastic. And then advocating for sustainability, I mean, it goes without saying 70% of this planet is covered by the ocean. So I think it is our duty to sustain it sustainably.
Hmm. What do you believe are the most significant obstacles and constraints to really implementing sustainable change in this industry? I mean, obviously, we have a lot that we need to tackle, from transitioning energy and fuel sources to training to things as simple as hull cleaning. How do you think the obstacles and constraints are existing in the industry?
So there's two things here. I think the one is more technical. So in the overall maritime industry, obviously we've got many hundreds of types of vessels. So it's not just one or a small selection of them, which means that there's definitely not one size fits all. And you need a lot of exploration there and innovation and research and development to see how to accommodate the whole world fleet. That's the technical element of it. But I also find that another constraint that we're seeing is probably a bit the mindset part slash leadership that needs to evolve, because we are one of the most resilient industries in this world. However, as you probably well know, we are a bit more conservative, a bit more reactive, will not really push beyond that comfort zone unless it's absolutely necessary. And unfortunately, sustainable change really needs everybody on decks, which means embracing diversity, innovation, opportunity. So that's the only way we can really, move forward with this.
I think what was really interesting in one of the conversations I had earlier was with Ingvild Asham, the CEO of BW LNG,
Mhm.
because she said that we really need to develop one industry voice. And I thought that that was really impactful because we have so many different industry bodies and so many different interest groups throughout the industry, not just nationally, but also internationally. And until we all come together and say who we want to be and what that direction looks like for the industry, it's really difficult to get all of the players on board. And I think that that leads directly into what you were talking about.
Yeah, well, it's quite, I mean, as I mentioned, the technical part, it is a very diverse industry in respect to segments. So obviously, you will have a lot of voices. But definitely bringing them together and kind of understanding that we need a different kind of leadership, and this will lead into a bit later in our conversation. And we need to also understand what we're saying, as you just said, who we want to be. Setting that narrative is quite important. So yeah, again, I mean, the IMO Secretary General says this a lot, but we need all hands on deck, and we need them as a unified voice.
What do you think the legacy constraints or preconceptions about the industry that exist need to be really considered to achieve a sustainable and resilient ocean economy?
So I think this leads on from our previous question that we were just touching upon. I think the major constraint that we have is that we've been keeping a very low profile for too long, and that may have served us for a while, but time has changed. And in this new ESG era, where we've got a new generation of shareholders, stakeholders, clients, social media, climate litigation, that's not the right way to go. I mean, we've got a fantastic story to tell. We are not telling it right. If you think that more than 50% of oxygen is supplied by the ocean, right? And almost 90% of international trade is carried by the ocean. And then SDG 14 Ocean Health is receiving it's the least funded SDG. It receives only 0.56% of philanthropic funding. So we're not doing something right, and that lies in the legacy of always keeping a low profile and not going about telling that story. But we have this fantastic story to tell, so we really should be getting that right.
I think that also kind of feeds into the industry talent gap and the lack and shortage of seafarers and the lack of diversity in the industry because people are recruiting their friends and it's all very quiet and not necessarily working towards getting the best talent into the industry. So I think that kind of highlights some of those problems.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something that I do say a lot, because not telling the story, not only are we hiring a bit internally and low profile, but also if talent and younger people don't know what we're doing and they've got this conception of what the industry is, which is sometimes not so favorable,
Mm-hmm.
why would they choose maritime?
I think that came up in the 40 by 30 workshops that we had here in Norway as well, trying to figure out how we can get more talent into the industry and more diverse talent into the industry. And that was definitely highlighted as one of the issues was the reputation and impression of the industry among uh, world players.
Yep.
How do you think that businesses operating in the ocean industry can really balance the economic development side with the ESG and kind of environmental protection side and how that balances work? Because there's always a trade off, at least in the short term, if not also in the long term. How do you think that the different people who are listening to this or who may come in contact with it can really find that balance?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and people always come and tell me, "Oh, ESG and sustainability is fun. It's a fantastic moral case." The thing is, it's not just a moral case. The business case for it is equally strong, if not stronger. I mean, we talked about talent, and if 5 years down the line or 10, you've got nobody to man your vessels and nobody to man your offices, then I don't really see how we can continue being running businesses and being resilient in an industry as such. I There was this article that I wrote in the latest Clean Energy magazine, and I named ESG shipping superhero. And I think that's exactly what it is. It's what the industry was waiting for to shine, because if companies fail to comply successfully illustrate how they're managing the risks and how they're complying, what they're doing, the value that they add to this world, that means that they will be subject to fines, reputational damages, less attractive to talent. Financiers won't be financing you anymore. So all of this are quite clearly key components of running a successful business. So definitely go hand in hand.
Can you discuss some examples of different sustainable initiatives or technology that you believe have the potential to transform the ocean industries in this balanced way?
Whereas I think there's quite a few, and this is one of the most fascinating in the industry because we're diverse initiative. I focus a bit on something that I like, and I think the IM partnership 3 years does a fantastic job at it. It's reached 100. They lead projects globally like Green Bridge 2050, which provides technical to members. IMO focuses on funding research, cloud fouling, which and of harmful aquatic use. And then obviously they've got the IMO UNEP Norway Innovation Forum that's been running for years very successfully. I'm going to stakeholders to see how we can globally collaborate. And then technologies, there's a lot of examples. I couldn't really discriminate, but I mentioned the big solution. I do like to start. Everybody believes that this vehicle is going to find that solution, and simpler than that, and things like biofouling. I can mention like startups like Eco Subsea or Wind Propulsion, Bound for Blue. There's incredible entrepreneurs out there doing amazing stuff for the industry. So sometimes the solution is a bit closer than what we think.
Yeah, I was at a conference Thursday, Friday, and there was a lot of focus on the nuclear solution because there's over 200 vessels powered by nuclear out there. They happen to belong to navies, but it's a very green solution compared to what we could do at a rapid scale. So it's quite interesting that that's not part of the main discussion. So there's a lot of technologies
It's
that
becoming,
maybe they put on the shelf.
Yeah, no, it's that nuclear is starting to reluctantly enter its way through foreign skies. So it will be interesting to see how that conversation goes.
Yeah, it will be really interesting for sure. I think that can be a really good solution. It just depends on a lot of different things, but there's a lot of constraints around that make it less viable than other potential solutions. But I don't see it as more hazardous than ammonia or hydrogen in the kind of volumes that we would be talking about to fuel the ocean industries. But that's a whole nother discussion.
It's a story again behind it, isn't it? Those preconceptions and it's traditional and conservative industries. Of the box is something we definitely have to do.
Yeah, but I think if you take an object look at it from a safety perspective, um, I would pick a nuclear 1,000 times before I picked hydrogen. um, but there's a lot of discussions that aren't being had because they're not publicly popular, and it's a very political industry in some ways.
Yeah.
It will be interesting to see how it evolves, I think. What advice would you give businesses that are seeking to adopt more sustainable practices, and particularly those that are facing challenges in changing their business models and practices to kind of meet the new expectations of ESG?
Well, I think we talked about leadership, so this has to come from the top. The person responsible for sustainability and ESG should be board or directly leading to the a lot. Unfortunately, still of other departments. It's either with risk or with the legal department or with marketing together. But have somebody on who's directly having the discussion with people. What I would also say is because it's a very broad subject, someone who's quite passionate about it, but also somebody who understands the community that it is a, so you need to a well-crafted way. And I think the only way businesses can do this is just to understand it's a separate function and that it has to be one-in-one with their business strategy.
Mhm. I completely agree. Um, in your experience, because you talked a bit about how we can form the stories around the ocean industry and how important those stories are, how can we be more effective in communication and branding strategies to kind of promote not only sustainable practices, but the industry as a whole from a talent perspective, or to kind of foster a culture of environmental responsibility within the industry? Because all of these are stories that we need to tell and need to collaborate on and have kind of a united front. How do you think we can manage that?
I always describe this when I go and consult a company and here at West as it's a change management process. So you need to first bring your on board because each and every yours is an ambassador of the company. And then you also need to focus on the stories, that you're saying. The best way to do it is to be doing right audience, tying your brand with your sustainability goals, that inspiration. I mean, people know something usually inspired, so to lead such a mass movement. I mean, having worked with a few startups, I always say, you might have developed the best solution for the industry, but unless you're putting it forward to the right audience and have that clear message, you can't really solve anything because nobody knows about it. So creating that clarity, that transparency, that inspirational key message that comes from within and reflects success is the most important to come and brand position yourself properly.
I'm thinking I haven't necessarily brand positioned my project as good as I could do, but hopefully you'll share it. I think that there's a lot that can be done
Yeah,
with the. I think that there's a lot that could be done with many different things in the industry that are just such cool solutions that no one ever heard of because it's just not reaching the audience. So I think that that's definitely a really important thing that needs to be done in order to
I think
transform and design the industry better.
yeah, and I think the issue is see a bit some traditional marketing may be a bit restrictive in that product and then they go through the the set route of promoting it. Sometimes something thought leadership exploring you want to be seen, you want to be can actually see you in the right form, understand what you're doing, and actually you. And I have huge startups have understood that, so thinking not just food.
Mm. How do you think that the COVID-19 pandemic has really impacted the industry's sustainability efforts, for good or bad? And what opportunities has it created to move forward with positive change from now on?
Well, I think the crisis, so it did put the agenda for a while, disrupted, and the focus was, of course, through change crisis was a tremendously terrible situation, paying the price. However, I feel what it has brought to the surface, for one, we saw a huge campaign on denoting seafarers like key workers. That should have been common sense. Unfortunately, it wasn't, but fortunately with COVID, it was brought to the surface. And also, I think people started to understand, what a ship does, and if it stops, the supply chain mainstream media. So it's an opportunity that may not have been very positive, but definitely one. And yes, exactly, because important to this process. They are not the most industry in the world. This is what we've been doing. This is what the ocean industry brings to the world. And just you've got like your narrative.
Mhm. I think that, while it's seen as a dirty industry per ton, it's the least beyond besides pipelines. The only thing you can get better than a ship is a pipe, and there are not that many goods that you can transmit via pipeline. And I think that
Exactly.
story hasn't been told nearly as much as it should be, because even if we replace some of the air freight with ship freight, or replace some of the train freight with shipborne freight, there's immediate carbon reductions to be had, even if those vessels are using heavy fuel oils. And I think that conversation isn't happening either. Which is really a pity,
Exactly.
because we could be, reducing things in a big way if we're moving freight from aircraft that's not necessarily time sensitive to shipping.
That is exactly a message. In fact, we're the most friendly means of transport, and unfortunately, people outside this industry don't really understand that. But it's an interesting narrative that we really should be resetting.
I think so too. The last question that I had on my list was, how do you see the future of the ocean industry, in particular in the terms of the potential to become more sustainable and more resilient? And what steps do you believe will need to be taken to achieve this vision? And what should I explore next through this project as it's evolving?
So I think we kind of touched upon it in different questions. Of this industry, ocean transport, as we just said, is already the most environmentally friendly international transport. Provide, to answer the question of what we can be doing, provide we see this shift of mindset, leadership, emerging powerful story and brand out of this. I think the ocean can truly be this sea of opportunities for attractive talent, innovation, being a key part of a sustainable world. On what you could explore more through this series, I think what you're doing is already a fantastic job, because you're part of telling that story now, and bringing people and showcasing what they're doing exactly is absolutely fantastic. And that's something that I have done in the past, and I'm very passionate about just showcasing who we are, do. Just seeing what the pain points people feel are, kind of making a brand, because you're a fantastic role model and the generation that, in exploring further through this challenge or initiative.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time to talk with me, to share your viewpoint, and I hope that you will continue to be a voice for the industry and to help shape that narrative and shape that discussion. Because, as you said, it's one of the most important things that we can do to support global ESGs. And yeah, thank you very, very much. And everyone can find you on LinkedIn.
Everybody can find me. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for having me, and everybody who's watching, and keep up the amazing work.
Thanks. Bye.